Good morning. How's everybody doing? So I'm here today with Mayor Sheehan, District Attorney Kindlon. We're here to brief about a number of incidents that happened yesterday. So there were three specific incidents that occurred between about 5:30 p.m. On yesterday, July 4th, and 1 a.m. This morning, July 5th. And in those three incidents, there were a total of 10 people shot in the city. So we want to just brief on those incidents, and then we'll take some questions. The first incident occurred at approximately 5:30 p.m. in the area of North 1st Street and Jennings Drive. In this incident, a 15-year-old male was shot in the foot, causing a graze wound to his toe area. He was located by officers in the process of being transported to the hospital by his mother. He was treated and released from the hospital, and that incident is under investigation by our juvenile unit. The second incident occurred just before 10 p.m. as the fireworks were ending at the Empire State Plaza. This incident occurred on Madison Avenue, just west of Swan Street. In this incident, an altercation occurred between a group of juveniles, resulting in one juvenile firing a flare gun and a second juvenile firing a handgun. The projectile from the flare gun struck the residence at 333 Madison Avenue, causing a structure fire. The rounds from the handgun struck 4 people that had attended the fireworks show, including a 17-year-old male who was critically wounded, a 17-year-old male that caused a gunshot wound to the leg, a 62-year-old female who had a gunshot wound also to her leg, and a 24-year-old female also with a gunshot wound to her leg. While on the scene, an Albany police officer was injured when an ambulance struck a parked vehicle, which then struck him. He received injuries to his lower extremities, namely his leg. He was treated and released at the hospital with minor injuries. None of the victims nor the occupants of the residence of 333 Madison Avenue that was destroyed as a result of that fire that was caused by the flare gun had anything to do with that original altercation. So I want to make sure to make that a point. That investigation is in its infancy and is ongoing. That scene was actively worked by members of the Albany Police Department, the New York State Police, and the Albany Fire Department to ensure the safety of the occupants of 333 Madison Avenue, the surrounding buildings, and the thousands of people that were leaving the fireworks. And I want to commend the men and women of the department, the police department, the state police, the fire department, and all the other departments that ultimately responded to that scene. It was quite a hectic scene. The third incident occurred just after 1 a.m. This morning on the 5th on Livingston Avenue, just west of Henry Johnson Boulevard. In this incident, a group of juveniles approached a residence on Livingston Avenue, and it was a residence that was intended. They fired a handgun with an undetermined number of rounds at a group that was in front of that residence, ultimately striking 5 individuals, including 2 16-year-old females, a 15-year-old female, a 14-year-old male, and a 41-year-old female. The 16-year-old females, one was struck in the arm, the other was struck in the legs. 15-year-old female was struck in the leg. The 14-year-old male was struck in the arm, and the 41-year-old female was struck in the shoulder. None of those injuries are life-threatening. All parties were transported to Albany Medical Center with non-life-threatening injuries and are in stable condition. This investigation is also in its infancy and ongoing. I want to note a couple of things. Obviously, there's a clear uptick in violence, specifically gun violence, both with handguns and flare guns with our teen population. While I have no doubt that the Albany Police Department, in cooperation with the District Attorney's Office, will bring these cases to justice, I know that will happen. Clearly, more needs to be done. I want to ask the parents and community members to please take stock. When I was 14, 15 years old, my parents, while they might not have always known what I was doing, they certainly would have known if I was running around with a handgun or a flare gun. So I'm asking the members of this community and parents, check what your kids have. Flare guns have now caused 2 residents in this city to go up in flames and wind up becoming total wrecks, total losses. And ultimately, we continue to have teens walking around our streets and just indiscriminately firing rounds at people. We cannot have that. That has to stop, and we need help to do that. We can continue to arrest people. We're good at that. The district attorney's office can continue to prosecute people. They're good at that. But at the end of the day, we need other people to step up and stop this action before it takes place. Plain and simple. There are a lot of really good community members in the city. There are a lot of people that want to help, want to take action. I know that, the mayor knows that, the DA knows that. But at the end of the day, other people need to take action. I don't want me to put this all on parenting. I know parenting is difficult. I have 2 sons of my own. It's not always easy. But at the end of the day, if your kid has a flare guns are extremely with people in that residence.
Were these ghost guns or unserialized weapons by any chance?
We do not know that yet.
Chief, can you just go over again with the incident right after the fireworks? How many of those who were shot or injured were targeted, and how many of them were innocent bystanders who were potentially just at the fireworks enjoying the show?
Well, I want to make clear that anybody that is shot is an innocent person. That I want to make clear that no matter what, someone that's shot is innocent. As far as the Madison Avenue incident goes, we do not believe that any of those parties was an intended victim of the shooting.
Was this tied or adjacent to organized crime in any capacity?
Not that we're aware.
Is this the largest amount of shooting victims that Albany's seen in one night?
I would have to go back and look at our records. It's in recent memory. It's the most I can remember. There may have been 1 or 2 other times when there might have been similar nights.
Mayor Sheehan, I know you only have about 6 months here left in office. We are coming up on what is typically a very violent time, unfortunately, with schools out, the weather getting warmer. We spoke with people last night who actually said, I'm afraid to leave my house. What do you say to the people of Albany who have that feeling, and how can you convince them now that they should be safe leaving their homes?
Well, you know, we have been on a path of seeing a significant reduction in gun violence in our city. And so tonight, or the occurrences of last night are deeply troubling. They're deeply troubling to me. And so I think what we need to say to the residents of the city of Albany is that we do have it within our power to change this trajectory. And that's by stepping forward, speaking up, speaking out. There are individuals in this city who know exactly who these individuals are who engaged in this activity, and they need to cooperate so that we can remove the danger that is posed to the residents in our community. Everyone in the city of Albany deserves to be safe. Everyone coming to the city of Albany deserves to be safe. And we will work tirelessly to ensure that we are able to find these individuals who were involved in this and bring them to justice. You know, as the district attorney said, there is a whole system that is there and available to assist juveniles and their families who may be on the wrong path. And it requires the parents of those juveniles and those juveniles to engage in the resources that are there. And that is the frustrating thing. You know, since Raise the Age, you know, states all across the country, we were one of only 2 states that prosecuted 15 and 16-year-olds as adults. One of only 2 in the country. And when you look across the country, other states have figured this out. They have figured out how to ensure that young people who deserve a second chance get that second chance, and how to, if we have to handle certain individuals because of the gravity of their offenses in adult court, handle them in adult court. Other states have figured this out. And what's frustrating to me as the mayor of Albany is that when Raise the Age was passed, tens of millions of dollars were made available to counties to engage young people who were going to now not be prosecuted as adults. And in Albany County, instead of getting more programs, we have less. I don't understand why. I don't understand what happened with those dollars, but we have a district attorney now who is committed to changing that trajectory. And if things need to change in order to ensure that participation in those programs is mandated and that there are consequences to not participating, then we need to change that. But the goal was to get young people help. And that didn't happen. So as a mayor, yeah, I stand here and say, we've got to do better. But by we, I mean the probation office that works with these young people. I mean the family court judges and figuring out how to ensure that young people are participating in these programs. And then those at the state level who are supposed to be accessing this funding for these programs. That has always happened at the county level, not at the city level. We engage with youth, and our police department engages with youth to prevent them from getting into trouble, right? That's where we spend our resources. It's when young people are then arrested and are then part of the criminal justice system, are on probation, that those services are supposed to be provided, and the funding is there. There's tens of millions of dollars still sitting at the state level that hasn't been deployed, and it's frustrating for me. And so if we have to take it into our own hands and figure out how to spend it ourselves, we will. That's what we did with dealing with the mental health crisis, and now we're partnering with the county to get mental health services out onto the street. And we will have to do the same thing here, but there are other systems that were created and funded that are supposed to be wrapping services around these young people to prevent this from happening.
So is this a call on the county executive to release some of those funds, or what?
Look,
can you do as mayor?
we all need to work together. And so I'm not going to call out another elected official. I'm sure that he's as equally frustrated as I am. But we've got to get to the bottom of what is happening here. Because I hear excuses and and nobody wants to hear that. I want my community to be safe. And so just as we came together with the county around the mental health crisis issue, and we worked with them, and the mental health department at our request went out and worked in the community to see how serious the challenge was, and then created programs that we're now deploying, we need to be doing the same things with our juveniles. Because this cannot stand. This cannot stand. And so no one of us can do it alone. And we've got to figure out, as the district attorney said, especially within the family court system, we don't know. This is very early days of this investigation, but I'm going to speak generally. Oftentimes, when we have a situation where a juvenile uses a gun, there have been multiple interactions with that juvenile before they pick up that gun and use it. They've been arrested, they've been in family court, they're having issues and acting out in school. So for the most part, we know who these young people are. And it has historically been Albany County Probation and the programs that are available that family court judges can funnel young people into that have helped to prevent them from getting further down that path and picking up that gun. Something is broken there. And so we've got to roll up our sleeves and get to the bottom of it. But it does start. Parents need to call us. Parents need to reach out. If you see this happening, we've got to do better. We've got to do better.
Chief, recently I've made a few calls, people in my block are throwing things, being threatened by people, and I live in Center Square, and I've been told by dispatch, we're too busy for this. Do you think this has anything to do with any vacancies in the department?
So this does not, first of all, you should not be being told that. We
Yeah.
respond. So that's not, there's no excuse for that. But we had in excess of probably 100 officers working last night. So no, absolutely not.
I just want to check, I know this is in the infancy of the investigation, but are there significant roadblocks in the way, or are you making relatively fast headway, so to speak, for what you have?
No, I'm just not, because we're so early in the investigation, I'm just not in a place to speak about the investigation at this minute.
How was the response time to this incident?
It was immediate.
Okay. Want to clarify? Thank you.
Chief, back to the incident on Madison, is it believed that it was a second person so there was one individual with that flare gun and then a separate individual with the handgun?
That's correct.
Okay. And the 17-year-old who is in critical condition, is his injuries believed to be life-threatening?
That's correct.
Thank you.
DA Kindlon, if you could go back to speak about raise the age again, because your predecessor spoke a lot about it, but there are several DAs throughout the state who kind of don't want to touch it because it's a very difficult subject to talk about. When that happened, many of the facilities where these juveniles could go, be separated, were closed. So what are some of the answers? What are some of the things that you're looking to do? Because it seems like you're pretty frustrated currently with the system.
Yeah, it is very frustrating. So, from an attorney point of view, the legislation is incomplete. And I've been saying this since day one. I said this as a candidate. It's incomplete to the point where we can't have any sort of rhyme or reason in terms of which kids get funneled into family court and which kids stay in the criminal justice system. So as a practitioner, when you're not dealing with rules that make any sense or that change from day to day, then there's no way to plan for the future, to figure out what we're going to be able to do with this young man or woman. And look, 95% of the kids who go through the youth part raise the age system probably should be in family court, but it's that 5% that, as the mayor alluded to, you pick them up early in school, they're on a really bad trajectory, then they appear in family court, and then we can't pull them off of their bad path despite our best efforts. And then now we're dealing with them in county court because they've graduated from this failed system to, frankly, some of our worst offenders we have right now that we're prosecuting have already been through the youth part family court system. So look, at the state level, we've got to fix the legislation, and I'll tell you the funding stream is backwards, and that's part of the problem. It's not Danny McCoy, it's not our county executive, it's the fact that the way the funding stream is set up, basically someone's supposed to run an entire program and then go to the state having set up and run the program and say, hey, can we have reimbursement, right? Instead of us saying, hey, I've got this program, can I get paid for it? And then the coffers are you're supposed to get the money then. So like the legislation's backwards. So that's one of the problems. So this two-pronged problem of the funding is all messed up, and then when we get somebody at the decision point of whether or not they're going to stay in the criminal justice system and let us, the prosecutors, probation, the court system, try and figure out what's the best plan for this person who may have committed a crime. They very quickly, really quickly, within a month, typically get the decisions made where they're put in they're taken out of the criminal justice system, they're put in the family court system. And then us prosecutors never see or hear of the case again. In fact, we can't. Like the door is shut and we can't see beyond it. And they're put into this family court system that is, lacks funding, lacks resources, lacks people who can come and help. They're overwhelmed. So I don't even blame them because I know they're doing their best, but they're overmatched. And so, and I know this is a long answer to a short question, but and my frustrations they're manifold. But I think, from the governor to the state legislature to the county to the mayor, and I take this, as you folks saw a minute ago, I take this very personally, and it's a very emotional thing for me because I feel like I'm not doing enough, and this is one of the things that I promised people I would try and fix, and I just, especially on days like today, I just feel so powerless in my ability to help, to help my community make this problem better. And look, cops have been working all night, prosecutors have been up all night, and we're going to keep working to try and fix this, and we won't give up. But that's why the three of us are standing up here saying we need help. We need as many people as we can to help, because it's not just going to be the three officers represented by the three of us here.
And I think it's a community problem, right? Everybody needs help, including us in the media, but what is your message directly to the governor, to the speaker, and to the majority leader? Because we know the governor is actually following this very closely right now.
I will sit down with them, as I've done in the past, gratefully. I really appreciate the fact that the governor and the speaker called on me and my expertise in the criminal justice system when we just fixed the discovery laws this year. You know, I will sit down with you and I will explain to you the problems we're having here in Albany, the problems that Darcel Clark just talked about down in New York City, the problem that prosecutors, practitioners across the state are bringing up when we talk about the problems and raise the age, because we gotta fix it. And and ultimately, look, I'm a pretty good lawyer and a pretty bad politician, so I'm not gonna give them political advice, but we need help.
Can I just add?
Please.
Look, I think that the thing that we hear, right, it's a cycle, and I'm gonna hear it, you're gonna hear it. We need more things for our kids to do. We have so much for our kids to do. We need a way to ensure that we have the ability to get kids who need to be mandated to be participating in certain types of activities, that we have the ability to do that. This is not about needing more youth basketball. Everybody will clamor that we need more programs for our kids. These are some of the hardest kids to reach. They're really difficult to work with. And oftentimes those programs are not designed to help them. And so we need to have, this is my shameless pitch for mayors, we need to have mayors at the table. Unfortunately, we're not at the table. You know, when decisions were made to close programs that the county had been running because it was no longer mandatory for young people to participate, that came as news to me. I had to learn that from the school district. I had no idea that that had happened because I'm not at the table. We don't participate in that. And so it is time for us. We owe it to this community. And I think it starts at the top with the state, but when they create this funding, they need to ensure that they have the right people at the table making the decisions, including mayors and police chiefs, so that we can hear from everyone in the community and design things that are going to work. I have great people who work for me. The chief has great people who work for him, who would be more than willing to participate in ensuring that we're addressing the needs of these young people and their parents in most cases, because in most cases, their parents also need help. But we got to be at the table. We need all hands on deck, and we can't stay siloed anymore. And that's what's frustrating for me today, because I look at what we've done and the investments that we've made and the progress that we've made, and yet we are still standing here with a tragedy, a tragic night in the city of Albany. Families impacted, young people impacted. We say non-life threatening, but the young people who were shot last night, they're going to carry that trauma with them. And if we don't do the right thing and we don't get them the help that they need, they're going to carry that forward and potentially be at risk of becoming a victim again or becoming a perpetrator. We know this. And so we owe it to all of them to say we can't stay in our silos. We got to get out of them. And I agree, I'm not blaming any politician. I'm saying we as a system have to do better.
And I just want to add, I was, back when Raise the Age came around, I was probably one of the only police chiefs in the state that spoke up and was for Raise the Age, just like I was a proponent and good with bail reform. But just because legislation happens doesn't mean legislation is perfect. And years later, when we know that legislation is not perfect when it goes through, when years later we know there's a fix that needs to happen, doesn't mean we don't fix it, especially when you're hearing from a progressive district attorney, a progressive mayor, and I think I've been labeled a progressive police chief before, probably worse than that, are all saying that this needs to be fixed. Because I don't say that a lot of 15-year-olds need to be taken off our street and put away, but if a 15-year-old's walking down the street and just indiscriminately firing into a crowd, well, I hate to say it, they got to be taken off the street and they got to go away. Because somewhere along the line, somebody fouled. And at that point, it's just too late. And we got to get them off the street. And we got to have a redo at that moment. There's a whole bunch of other kids we need to save, but that kid at this moment, we need to get off the street. And if all of our options have been taken away and we have judges releasing those kids And if everybody's pointing to raise the age as the reason why they're releasing them, there's a problem. Either the judges don't understand the law, or the law is messed up, and we need to fix that law. That doesn't mean we have to throw raise the age out, because we certainly don't need to prosecute every 16 and 17-year-old as an adult again. That would be wrong. But when we have 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds shooting the street up, that certainly doesn't mean that we just need to go like, oh, well, we can't do anything with those kids. We need to get them off the street, because we need to protect the community, and we need to protect that kid. Because what else we know is that the same kids that wind up shooting people also wind up becoming victims of shooting. So we need to get them off the street. We need to be able to take those actions. So we need to be able to tweak our laws. We can't just put a law into place and be like, oh, it's perfect. There's no such thing as a perfect law. We actually have to be able to make changes and listen to the people that are actually out there doing the job. We can't just sit in our offices. I can't just sit in my office all day and not listen to my officers. We actually have to be able to listen to people and make the changes necessary to actually keep communities safe. All right, thank you all.